We're back. We are so grateful for all the honest feedback you shared on our last video, talking about how you guys were so grateful. We were open and honest. So we're here to do that again. Share about
Try to, at least.
Yeah. Not a lot of people share about, we didn't hear a lot of people sharing about when we were dating and even within marriage. We're going to talk about our decision to save sex for marriage and how we've seen that benefit our marriage, bear a lot of fruit in our marriage, and why we're glad that we chose that together. You can submit questions, if we come back to do more videos. If you guys keep enjoying these, you can follow me on Instagram at EMWILSS. I open a question box sometimes. We do Q&As over there on stories if you want to join us over there. So to today's topic, that choice when we were dating, kind of how has that benefited our marriage?
Let's get into it then. So how do you see a benefit now in our marriage from making that decision?
One of the first things that I think that I've seen is, and we can only speak from our own experiences, right? We're not going to make 1,000 disclaimers like, we can't speak for everybody. Like, we're going to share openly our perspective with you. But for us, within dating, so often when I'm talking with women, sex can be a band-aid for problems in relationships, right? And you can use that where you get in a big argument and then you have sex and you don't really confront the problem in dating. Like we had to confront the problems without using sex as a tool to confront the problem or feel close to one another, or like a band-aid to cover up our problems.
And I think, and obviously a lot of you guys probably know our story with we're doing long distance dating. So you may think, oh, well, you guys were doing long distance dating, so it's easier because you're obviously not together physically as well, so you were kind of forced to do the communication, which is true to a certain degree. But obviously we lived in I moved to California for 7 months before we got married, and then I then went back when the finish and came back again for another 5 months.
So crazy story.
It was almost a year of me living in California as well before we were married. At the time that we were still dating and being engaged. So I definitely agree with that, because I think the root of what we were able to develop was that communication part, and having sex not be a band-aid to cover things up with, but also having it not be a focal point of our relationship. And so
that's very true. Or like the center where everything revolved around sex.
Exactly, because I could easily see how, because sex is so great and so good and so
such
unifying,
a good and beautiful thing, yes,
is that your relationship can easily start evolving around that, because you want that feeling of intimacy, that feeling of love, that feeling of being together. But instead of having your relationship revolve around that feeling or around that experience, I feel ours was way more rooted in, obviously in faith, but into communication and into, a lot of other different variables, instead of, I would say putting a lot of our eggs in one basket, spreading it across the board, so to speak. The point to that as well, actually, is that at a certain point, like we talked about in our last video, with pregnancy, with postpartum, all that stuff,
kinds of your seasons,
there's going to be a lot of seasons in your life where you just physically, you can't have sex for a reason A, B, C, or D, or you're not together, or whatever it is.
One of us gets sick, severely sick. I mean, there's so many different times. But it's true. Everything did not revolve around that. Now, within our marriage even, sex is a facet of our relationship, but sex isn't the basis of our relationship or the entirety of our relationship.
It's a beautiful part. It's a beautiful, amazing part of our relationship.
It totally is. And I think that there's been so much damage. And I've talked about this in other videos that's been done with, teaching young people that sex is a bad thing, right? No, it's a good thing in the right context. It's a beautiful thing, right? Within our marriage. And it's normal for people who are in love to want to have sex with each other. For those of you who are struggling to remain chaste in your dating relationships, I want you to know that that is a normal thing.
I struggled with that, I think, like you said, anybody that's so obviously in love with each other, you want to be physically one, right? You want to become one. You want to have sex, and that's only a natural and I think a good part. But it's up to you to control that.
That's a whole, there are many branches to this tree. Definitely just wanted you guys to know that. And the intensity of it also, when we're apart from each other for so long in long distance, that can make it also difficult. Like you're apart from each other, so you can't have sex with each other, but when you are together, the emotions and the feelings are so intense, and that makes it extra difficult when you reunite with each other.
I think another part as well for me is having made that decision. I made that decision for myself to stay pure going into marriage long before I met Emily. That was a personal decision of my own in my own faith journey. But for me, looking back at it now, how that has also spilled into our marriage is I can look back and say that I had the discipline to control my passions and my desires leading up. So like we just said, obviously I was, and I still am super attractive to Emily, and
Thanks.
But leading up to marriage, the choice I made to stay chaste allows me to see for myself that I can control my passions. And I think that translates into other facets of our marriage as well. For us both to go into marriage, both wanting this thing,
right.
But both knowing it'll be even better, after we get married and after we say our vows and after we become one, like the Lord has laid it out for us. That shows us that we can apply that same principle, so to speak, in other assets of our marriage as well. And I feel that we are applying that, not in a it just happens naturally, and you can apply that to your finances. You can apply it to your lifestyle, your whatever it is.
Just self-discipline across the board.
Exactly. So it's not like, I want to buy this expensive watch or car or whatever it is, and I'm just gonna buy it and swipe my credit card and I'll deal with it later. Or not that those might not be the greatest example of all, but the point of it is obviously like controlling your passions. And that for me, I think as a guy, and I don't know how it is for you, I want to be in control, of my passions, and it helps me feel like I am in control. Like through the Lord, I can be in control of myself, and I feel freer for that. There's a quote by Saint Dominic that says, "A man who governs his passions is master of his world." And then I think it says you can either be in command of your passions or enslaved to them. And he says it's better to be a hammer than an anvil, is what the terminology is that he uses. Which is like the anvil is like the diamond thing that the blacksmith like bangs his hammer on. And that's how I want to live my life. And I'm glad I chose to do that, because it allows me to translate that over into other aspects of our marriage.
Totally.
Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And we touched on it last time, and we can talk more about this another time also, especially like after having babies, right? We can't have sex because I have surgery, and we can't have sex for a long time. And even after that, the doctor can give you the go ahead, no matter what type of birth you have, and you can just say to your husband, like, I am not ready to have sex with you right now. And he has to accept that. And practicing that within dating has helped us so much, across the board, but in those times where it's just not an option, and we have to know how to feel close to each other without that as an option.
Yeah, there's two things there. I think exactly what you said. We have to know that, or we have to know what are the other ways that you and I can feel that intimacy aside from having sex.
Right,
so what are other things that we can do?
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think, especially for guys, you have to figure out for yourself what kind of other outlet you can apply yourself to get rid of that frustration or sexual frustration, so to say, that builds up in you, which is just a real thing. I would say for me, that's like working out or being active, or doing sports or running or swimming or surfing, or it just keeps me going and keeps me moving. But even with that, obviously, there's still that actual the choice and the understanding that we both make to say, hey, this is what's going to work for you, this is what's going to work for me. Let's find a common ground that works for both of us. And again, the communication part, having both of us be on the same page and know how the other person is feeling.
And I think another important thing is that within dating, right, we had to talk about our boundaries and physical intimacy and all of those things. We had to talk about them, because you can't just say like, oh, I assume what your boundaries are. You shared in a prayer video about how when you asked me to be your girlfriend, you set out the boundaries. And when you're comfortable talking about those things, it's so important, because that carries over into your marriage too.
I agree, yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too. That's actually a really good point. I never even thought about that. Yeah, it is, being comfortable. For me, that comes down to being comfortable with myself and knowing what I stand for, and not being afraid to express that to someone else, so that they also know, this is what I'm about, and this is what I do feel comfortable, and what I feel comfortable with, and what I do not feel comfortable with. That's another important part, showing that you're able to communicate and talk about things that might be quote unquote awkward or uncomfortable, or you're not really sure. But there'll be a lot of topics in marriage, that will come up that are going to be uncomfortable as well, or not pleasant, or something that you have to work through. But it's good to feel that you're in an environment that you can talk about it, but also for yourself have the courage to bring that forth.
Totally. With the temptation to have sex with one another, with choosing to live chastely together, to honor one another in that way again and again, you have to have many conversations about that. everybody I know who has ever waited until marriage together has had to communicate about that through dating and through engagement, and that carries over into marriage. Adding to that, I think one of the like beautiful parts about it is that it's something we've only shared in marriage, and it's just like this unique experience to marriage, and it's so sacred, like within the covenant of our marriage. It's only ever been a part of our marriage.
You know, it's better than I could have ever imagined, you know, like just because it's in that setting and in that environment that we share that with and give all of ourselves. That isn't talked about enough as a beautiful, beautiful thing, I think it's either because the world, I think, has washed it down to be something that's, you know, consumable. We don't have to go into that whole thing, right? But
well, yeah.
but that makes it so the beauty of it, so to speak, gets lost, because now if you talk about sex, it's very quickly it's seen as this thing that is, you know, disposable, that is meaningless, that is just,
yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's why I think people are less comfortable even talking about it. But I think more people should talk about it in the proper context,
right?
And you know, and that's what I feel that we're, you know,
totally
doing today.
And I think something that we'll touch on another day is the beauty and the reality that, you know, on your wedding night, if you've waited to save sex for marriage, it's not going to be like this amazing, awesome, you know, fireworks kind of thing.
It was for me though, and not because like, oh wow, we both were, you know, really good, and we, you know, what is good or what is bad or whatever,
yeah.
Right? But it was because it was you and me finally consuming this most sacred thing that we had waited for so long. So I don't think that you should. I don't think what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think that applies. I think it is exactly that, and obviously it only gets better as you go along, for sure.
Totally.
But I don't think you need to wash that down at all, because it is that. It is that. Honestly, that was absolutely beautiful. And I think that's there's no need to wash that down whatsoever.
I totally agree, and I think you speak so beautifully, like, to the heart of it. Like, the deeper your love grows, the deeper that aspect of your relationship grows, I feel. And it's not always, you know, perfect and amazing. Like we talked about just within our marriage last year, there are ebbs and flows within just your relationship in general, but there are also, I feel, ebbs and flows within like sex. But I think overall, definitely over time, it has just gone more deep and more rich and more beautiful.
I agree.
So there you have it. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy us sharing from our hearts. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah,
I think it's so, I mean, it's even cool for me to hear what you have to say on these topics. So we will talk to you soon. Bye.